Okay, so we're going to go to Genesis chapter 27, and I'll read it. It's always a good idea. Thank you, John. So in the course of time, after Yitzhak had grown old and his eyes were dim so that he couldn't see, he called Esav his older son and said to him, "My son." And he answered, "Here I am. Behold, I'm old now, and I don't know when the time to come is for me to die. Therefore, please take your hunting gear, your quiver of arrows, and your bow. Go out into the country and get me some game. Make it tasty the way I like it, and bring it to me to eat. Then I will bless you before I die." Now Rivkah was listening when Yitzhak spoke to his son Esav, and so Esav went out to the country to hunt for game and bring it back. And she said to her son Yaakov, "Listen, I heard your father telling Esav your brother, 'Bring me game and make it tasty so I can eat it. Then I will give you my blessing in the presence of Adonai before my death. Now pay attention to me, my son, and do what I tell you. Go to the flock and bring me back 2 choice goats. I will make it tasty for your father the way he likes it, and you will bring it to your father to eat so that he will give his blessing to you before his death." Yaakov answered Rivkah his mother, "Behold, Esav is hairy, but I have smooth skin. Suppose my father touches me, he'll know that I'm trying to trick him, and I'll bring a curse on myself and not a blessing." But his mother said, "Let your curse be on me. Just listen to me and go get me the goats." So he went out, got them, and brought them to his mother, and his mother prepared them in the tasty way that his father loved. Next, Rivkah took Esav, her older son's best clothing, which she had with her in the house, and put them on Yaakov, her younger son. And she put the skins of the goats on his hands and on the smooth parts of his neck. Then she gave the tasty food and the bread she had prepared to her son Yaakov. He went to his father and said, "My father." And he replied, "Here I am. Who are you, my son?" And Yaakov said to his father, "I am Esav, your firstborn. I've done what you asked me to do. Get up now, sit down, eat the game, and then give me your blessing." Yitzhak said to his son, "How did you find it so quickly, my son?" And he answered, "Adonai, your Elohim, made it happen that way." Now Yitzhak said to Yaakov, "Come here, come closer to me, so I can touch you, my son, and know whether you are indeed my son Esav or not." Yaakov approached Yitzhak, his father, who touched him and said, "The voice is Yaakov's voice, but the hands are Esav's hands." However, he didn't detect him, because his hands were hairy like his brother Esav's hands. So he gave him his blessing, and he asked, "Are you really my son Esav?" And he replied, "I am." And he said, "Bring it here to me, and I will eat my son's game, so that I can give you my blessing." So he brought it up to him, and he ate, and he also brought him wine, and he drank. Then his father Yitzhak said to him, "Come close now and kiss me, my son." He approached and kissed him. Yitzhak smelled his clothes and blessed Yaakov with these words, "Behold, my son smells like a field which the Lord has blessed. So may God give you dew from heaven, the richness of the earth, and grain and wine in abundance. May peoples serve you, and nations bow down to you. May you be Lord over your kinsmen. Let your mother's descendants bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you." But as soon as Yitzhak had finished giving his blessing to Yaakov, and when Yaakov had barely left his father's presence, Esav his brother came in from his hunting. He too had prepared a tasty meal and brought it to his father. And now he said to his father, "Let my father get up and eat from his son's game, so that you may give me your blessing." His father said to him, "Who are you?" And he answered, "I am your son, your firstborn, Esav." Yitzhak began trembling uncontrollably and said, "Then who was it that took game and brought it to me? I ate it all just before you came, and I gave my blessing to him. That's the truth, and the blessing must stand." When Esav heard his father's words, he burst into loud, bitter sobbing. "Father, bless me too," he begged. He replied, "Your brother came deceitfully and took away your blessing." Esav said, "His name, Yaakov, really suits him, because he has supplanted me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and here now he has taken away my blessing." Then he asked, "Haven't you saved a blessing for me?" Yitzhak answered Esav, "Behold, I have made him your lord. I have given him all his kinsmen as servants, and I have given him grain and wine to sustain him. What else is there that I can do for you, my son?" Esav said to his father, "Have you only the one blessing, my father? Bless me too, my father." Esav wept aloud, and Yitzhak his father answered him, "Behold, your home will be of or away from the richness of the earth, and away from or of the dew of heaven from above. You will live by your sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you break loose, you will shake his yoke off your neck." Esav hated his brother because of the blessing his father had given him. Esav said to himself, "The time for mourning my father will soon come, and then I will kill my brother Yaakov." But the words of Esav, her older son, were told to Rivkah. So she sent for Yaakov, her younger son, and said to him, "Behold, your brother Esav is comforting himself over you by planning to kill you. Therefore, my son, listen to me. Get up and escape to Lavan, my brother, in Haran. Stay with him a little while until your brother's anger subsides. Your brother's anger will turn away from you, and he will forget what you did to him. Then I'll send and bring you back from there. Why should I lose both of you on the same day?" Rivkah said to Yitzhak, "I'm sick to death of the Hittite women. If Yaakov marries one of the Hittite women like those who live here, my life won't be worth living." Very interesting, isn't it? Okay, so we have a couple of points. Now, you know what? I thought I would ask you, and I'll just open the floor for a moment. Do you have anything that you noted in this passage which stuck out to you like a sore thumb, or just raised some red flags, or was really have your curiosity piqued? Do you have anything that you'd like to bring up, Gracie?
I think it's funny that she told Jacob that to go away until Esau forgets what happened, and everything will be okay.
Doesn't seem likely, does it?
Give me a break.
Yeah, that doesn't seem likely. I agree.
What happens?
It is actually kind of what happens, though, in a sense. Yeah. I mean, he didn't. I doubt that he forgot.
He didn't forget.
So how do you mean, Mike?
Because when they meet up, he forgets his anger.
Well, yeah, in a sense. I mean, he doesn't.
And then there's.
Well, he never expresses his anger. We don't know whether he forgot
He
it.
doesn't try to kill him.
No, he doesn't try to kill him.
And at the end of this chapter, he's
Well,
trying to
that's
kill him, right?
that's possible, Carla. Yes, there are those marks in the Hebrew which may
What's that?
suggest the marks over the word he kissed him that may suggest he was actually wishing to rip out his throat. But we'll have to look at that. That's coming right up. But yeah, that's an interesting observation. Anyone else have any comments, questions, or concerns that just popped out at you in this section?
I think it seems interesting that Isaac seems kind of fleshly in the end of this last chapter and this chapter. Like, he loves Esau because of
The meat.
being able to bring him food, right? And
Yeah.
then, like, all of his senses are what leads him to believe this is Esau.
Mhm,
He feels.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I've got a question about that, but I think you're absolutely right. There seems to be, which is really awkward, because it seems like when he was younger that the impression that we were left with in the text is that he was a very righteous young man. We didn't see anything like this, but as he gets older, he seems to be turning more fleshly, which certainly seems awkward, because you think that with wisdom comes with age, and that you kind of grow into that stature, but that seems to be backwards in his case, which is very unusual indeed. I mean, the decision-making skills that both parents exhibit in this situation is a little rough. Gracie?
I think they needed more parenting counsel.
Yes.
Like favorites with kids.
Yeah, that's a huge thing, man.
These boys
Yeah.
didn't stand a chance at loving each other in a normal way.
Yeah.
As twins would normally be very,
Sure.
very close.
Sure. Yeah.
It just isn't that way.
Yeah, and that's another thing that, frankly, had never occurred to me, Gracie, until you just mentioned that you naturally assume that twins are going to be really close. And frankly, I've known a few twins in my life, and they were very close.
Very individual in their personality.
Sure, but always very loving.
always.
Yeah, always very loving and kind and supportive of each other. And that has never actually occurred to me, that these twins are anything but supportive and loving and kind of each other, which is also backwards.
And I wonder how much that was the parents' fault.
It certainly seems possible that we have some parenting faux pas going on here. It just seems to drag right through. Carla, are you tentatively raising your hand? You seem a little timid there. Go for it, sister. Go ahead.
Right off the bat, it talks about that Isaac was old and his eyes were too dim to see.
Yeah.
And it's like he's partially blind and is, I think of it in a spiritual way of him starting to lose his revelation of things, perhaps, spiritually speaking.
Yeah.
And yet, seeing is one thing, being able to see that, but hearing is another. And I thought that Yaakov gave him a huge clue that it was actually Yaakov, not Esau, in verse 20. Because when he comes in, and Isaac says to him, "How is it that you have it so quickly, my son?" And he said, "Because Yod-Heh-Vav, your Elohim, caused it to happen to me." I don't think Esau would ever have given God credit for anything.
Hold on to that thought. We're going to talk about that in a moment. That's a good observation. Good observation. Angela?
I forgot.
Did you? I apologize.
I think it's also another one of these moments where we have to look at the comparison between the three women, Sarah, Rebecca, and Rachel. And like this is Rebecca pushing this prophecy forward that she received. She's not gonna. She was given a prophecy. She wants to make sure that this thing happens.
Yeah.
Or she was given the responsibility to help make sure it happened.
Interesting observation. Angela, and then Keith?
I understand that, well, we were saying about the parents and everything, but you have to remember that these two were fighting in the womb before they were ever parents.
That's a good point. They were fighting when they were in the mother's belly. Yeah, that's a good observation. Good thing to keep in mind. Keith, and then Caden?
Well, the fact that Rebecca hides behind the scenes there, of course, listens in, and then she has him go to the flock to get the food where Esau's got to go out to the field. And then, why is there two goats? Okay?
Yeah.
It only takes one goat to make a meal. Yeah, we need two goats.
Good observation. We're going to deal with that in a moment, too. Absolutely.
And then the whole thing is, then he says, now did he really lie? Because he did. Does he have the birth? He owns the birthright, right?
That's
so he's
true.
The firstborn now, right?
Yeah.
He took that from Esau.
Right.
Esau reveals it by finally telling his dad, he took my birthright, so that I'm sure
Right.
Isaac must feel a little bit relieved. Okay, I did give it to the right kid. But he says, did he really lie? Because everybody's saying, oh yeah, he lied, because he says, I'm Harry, and I'm your firstborn now.
You know, that's a good point, Keith. And there are actually, in the rabbinic commentaries, at least 3 different ways that you can actually interpret that passage. Now, I don't know how valid that is. It certainly could be. But according to the scholars that I have read, you can actually, he technically could have said, if you want to translate it this way, here I am, Esav is your firstborn. It's me, Esau is your firstborn. So he didn't say, you could technically read it not, I am Esau, but I am here, Esau is your firstborn. There are actually alternate renderings of that Hebrew expression. If you want to fudge it and twist it around to say he didn't really lie, you could do that. Now, is that valid? I don't know. I mean, there certainly seems some deception here, and I think that a good indication that he did lie is that the law of sowing and reaping came and bit him on his rear end in a little while when Uncle Laban does the exact same thing to him. That's a good observation, Keith. Thank you. Caden.
I totally forgot what I was going to say, so...
Okay, I apologize. Okay, now hold on. Jerry, did you want to throw something out there?
I was going to say, if Esau had gotten the blessing, there'd be no Israel today.
That is potentially true, yeah.
Because nobody would have gone back to wherever it was he went, Jacob went.
Yep.
Got the 2 wives and the 12 sons and all that. Esau never would have taught God's concepts and laws to his
Sure.
children if he had any children.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
Jacob, people called him Moses, whether a lot of what he was doing was learning the law, God's laws, God's ordinances and
Mhm.
records and all that stuff, so that he could teach them to his kids, so when they went down into Egypt, they could keep this thing going.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Carla?
In talking about if he lied or not, I get stuck on verse 24 because Isaac asked him, "Are you really my son Esau?" And he replies, "I am."
Yes. Yes.
So that to me, there is a deceptive answer.
Yeah.
It's not true. But then, if he's thinking following Torah, I mean, it's not the best example, but his mother asked him to do something, and he's honoring her.
That is a challenging thing when you have to weigh. That is where having excellent discernment comes in, when you want to honor your father and mother, but you have to dishonor your father by honoring your mother. That's a challenging situation.
Well, what does the word honor mean here? I think it's not so much of honoring as I have always thought honoring as in respecting.
Yes, I think that.
You can honor or respect the position
Right.
without honoring or no, well, you don't want to show disrespect anyway, but without actually agreeing with the person's.
Right.
This is something we've tried to teach
Right.
our grandkids,
Right.
Because their real dad is really.
Well, you know what's interesting that comes to my attention as you were bringing that up is that we actually talked about that. I think when we were studying Genesis, it seems like it was a while ago now, but I remember some interesting revelations that came about as we were talking about the commandment to honor your father and mother. And we noted that in Western culture and our own ideas, a lot of times we have the idea of, showing them respect. But that when we looked at it in the Hebrew, it seemed to be directly related to giving great weight to everything that they spoke. That it was about giving great weight and honor to the words that came out of their mouth, which was kind of interesting. I've always just gone with, respect them. But honoring your father and mother really had to do with giving great weight to their words, which is kind of interesting. But you guys have really picked up on a lot of the things that I think just stick right out at you as you're reading through this section that really came to light with my own notes to myself. I think I hit on exactly those same points. So let's break these down just a little bit more and kind of break them down and talk about them just a little bit. Now I want you to note first that, and we'll take them in order, note first that both Isaac and Rebekah are limited in their vision, but for different reasons. Isaac is old, and his eyesight is failing. Rebekah, she can't see because she's eavesdropping. She's using her ears to listen in on what's going on, but she can't actually see what's happening. Both of them have limited vision, but for different reasons. Do you think that there's something that can be gleaned from this lack of vision on the part of both of them and the cause of the lack of vision on both of their parts? That one is a physical affliction of the eyes, and the other is because she's hidden and listening secretly? Does anything come to mind? And I'm not going to suggest to you that there's some big revelation there, but it just occurred to me that they are both blind in certain ways, or blinded by different things, perhaps. Any insight or comments about that idea? It's okay if you don't. That's a challenging question. It occurred to me that perhaps one is signifying a certain blindness due to the flesh, as we've mentioned before about Isaac seeming to become a little bit more fleshly, lusting after his son's game, and his responses seem to be kind of in reverse, backwards here as he's aging somehow. But then one that is somehow the hiding part, and she's obviously hiding behind the tent flap or something and listening to what's happening and eavesdropping. It reminds me of a spiritual kind of thing, because hidden things always remind me of spiritual things. And so her blindness appears to be a little bit more spiritual than physical. and especially in regards to how they dealt with the revelation from God regarding these two children and how each is dealing with it. One is dealing with it in what she perceives to be a spiritual way, and the other not so much. For example, it is presumed that both Isaac and Rivka knew about the prophecy, the oracle of God. She went and sought after God somehow and got the message regarding one of the older is going to serve the younger. Now, do you imagine that she did not tell her husband? I can't imagine that. What do you imagine in that regard? I know it's just your imagination, but I mean, maybe some of you mothers pipe in there. What are you going to do with that information, Keith?
You're absolutely correct. Because most women, they have to tell you everything. They want to talk to you.
Don't be sexist, Keith.
They're very willing to share their day with you. Okay? So I think he knew, but he didn't remember.
Okay, Carla?
Well, I also.
He wasn't listening. He had selective hearing.
That's the other side.
That's a good answer, Tammy. Sorry, Carla.
I also, it brings to mind Mary, who the Lord told her things about the child within her, and then she also observed things once he was born and was growing up, and she would keep those things in her heart. It doesn't say she started talking to everybody about that or
Yeah.
anybody.
Yeah.
So it just depends.
Right.
I'm not convinced he knew because he shook so bad after he had the revelation. It was Jacob. I don't know.
I don't think she told her because I think that if she had, I think back then, at that point in his life, is from what I've read, and I may be missing something, he would have possibly been concerned, but he wouldn't have turned away from what Jehovah had said. I don't think he would have. I really don't.
Does it concern you? What do you think about the idea? We know that Jacob has already purchased the birthright from his brother. Does it seem to you that nobody knows about that? Because it would be highly irregular.
I think his mother would.
That he had purchased the birthright from his brother? Do you think that Isaac did not know that?
Tell her everything.
It would be highly unusual, very irregular, to give the birthright to one son and the blessing to another. That'd be very weird. So it's almost like either Isaac did not know about either of these things, or he knew about both of them, or he knew about only one. If he knew about both of them, we got a problem. If he knew about only one, we got a problem. If he knows about neither of them, we still got a problem, but it's not exactly his fault. He thinks he's doing what he should be doing, and that is just passing on the blessing and the birthright to the firstborn son. Now, but he would have to not only not know about the birthright being sold, he would also have to not know that prophecy had been given to his wife. He would also have to be almost entirely blind to the character of his own two sons. To say, maybe question to his wife, to his God, are you sure that I should be passing along the firstborn blessing and the rights and the blessings and everything to Esau? I mean, he's a godless person. You remember what the Apostle Paul said about in the book of Hebrews, I think it's Hebrews chapter 11, where he says Esau, you see that no root of bitterness spring up amongst you, so that you become evil like Esau, a godless man who sold his birthright.
Well, I think perhaps in growing up he may not have been that way, but like in that Aleph Tav scripture, and it wasn't till he didn't get the blessing that the Aleph Tav isn't with him anymore. So he may have been walking in some regard.
It's possible. It's possible. He it shows both Paul says and the Torah says that he scorned and showed disrespect for his birthright. And we kind of talked about that last week, which it does seem to suggest he didn't have much esteem for it seems to me that he's not terribly interested in the responsibilities and the honor that comes with the right of the firstborn. He's more interested with just getting the stuff. And so, like we're going back to how Isaac is perceiving this, he'd have to be ignorant to a whole lot of stuff in order to be going ahead and trying to give the blessing to Esau. He'd have to be ignorant about a whole lot of stuff. The character of these children, the prophecy, and the sale of the birthright. Jerry?
These twins, they were only 15 years old.
When?
They sold birthright, so he might not have even really fully understood what he was doing.
It's possible. It's possible.
Most
They say
people
Esau
don't
despised.
It does say that Esau despised the birthright, and the Apostle Paul picks up on that same comment. John?
Is that a new word? You know, when you click on it, because everything is like 3 to 20 meanings.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right. And that would somebody want to look into that at the end of chapter 25 to pull up. My text actually, if I remember correctly, did read, "Thus Esau demonstrated his lack of respect." I don't know, I didn't look at the exact Hebrew translation. Now, I think that I would give some weight to the Apostle Paul, who was a rabbi, and who, he was interpreting that passage for us in Hebrews 11, saying, "Thus he despised his birthright." He was a godless man. So, I don't know. Angela?
Oh, I just wondered where that was that you just said.
Okay.
Yeah.
Keith?
The word is bazan. It says disesteem, despise, disdain. So think to scorn a vile person.
Yeah.
So Esau was that.
Seems to be. So yeah, I do have an issue a little bit with giving Isaac a pass. I do have a little bit of trouble with that. It could be, but it seems unlikely to me. I don't know that I'm willing to give Isaac a pass and say, I just don't think he knew. I think he possibly did. He'd have to be awfully blind in more than one way. John?
So basically the whole family is corrupt. Beside of this is still another meaning. I'm just trying to understand because it's so sudden for everything goes well up to now. And now suddenly we get this chapter, this lengthy chapter, in where we see from, okay, this person is...
Well, I think I see what you're saying, but I wouldn't say that it went to hell in a handbasket lickety-split. It has been headed that direction. I mean, we see that her pregnancy is got some issues. That's kind of our little premonition that something's going wrong. Then immediately after that, like somebody mentioned, when the boys are young, one's off doing something, possibly during Grandpa Abraham's funeral, and comes in famished from the field and despises his birthright. And then all of a sudden we got this with these two kids, and they were fighting in the womb, and it's continuing on. So I don't know that I would say things went horribly wrong all of a sudden. I think that things were wrong right from the get-go. But I think what's also perhaps even more significant or more important is that, and we need to really remember this about our Bibles, is that like most heroic, epic literature that is written from the perspective of other cultures about their heroes of the ancient times and such like that, they write glowing accounts where they're heroic and perfect, and our God doesn't do that at all. He shows us our people in all of their flaws and all of their ugliness and all of their stumblings. And frankly, I don't think we should be surprised by that, because we're all still doing it today. Somebody once said, I don't remember who it was, it's probably some Hebrew roots teacher that you guys will recognize, but somebody said, you can tell the flock of Jacob because they're speckled and spotted and mottled and messed up. You know who Jacob's flock is. And I think that's the point we need to remember, is to not be hypocrites like the Pharisees were, that say, what are you talking about? I think everything's fine. We're doing great. No, you're not. You're just as corrupt as anyone else. It is only by the grace of God that you have any standing at all, because none of us are doing a particularly fabulous job. And I'll be the first to say, it's not me. I'm not doing great. I'm not a perfect guy. I screw up all the time. Just ask my wife. Gracie, I apologize.
I just think it should be an encouragement to us sold in Egypt, and this going on and on through the scripture, and then probably every one of us, I know I can look at situations in my life that I wasn't trying to do the right thing, but God turned it around. I did what I was going to do, or Joseph's brothers did what they were going to do, or Jacob did what he was going to do, and they meant it for bad or for their own selfish gain.
Right.
But
But it
God
all
meant
works
for
out
good.
to God's glory, doesn't it?
But God meant it for good.
Romans chapter 8. You can't beat that passage with a stick. I love it. Carla.
On the scripture about Esau despising the birthright, hearing that he was, rather young, I just was thinking, well, he may not have grasped the importance of it, or I don't know if he had witnessed the importance of it.
I have a question in that regard. Now, somebody, I think it might have been Jerry, just mentioned that they were 15 years old when that happened. Is that true? I don't know whether that... Where'd you get that information, Jerry? Verify yourself, sir.
You just figured out the timeline.
Yeah, when
Is that accurate? Okay. I'm not questioning you, Jerry. Okay, just checking.
So if he went into this situation and just didn't realize the ramifications of it and kind of, okay, I'll take it, but afterwards, having realized what he had done, then despising it, actually despising it. It's one thing to just kind of not regard it because you're just a teenager or something.
Sure.
But then you become aware and you start despising it and being very angry and bitter.
Yeah, that makes sense. Mike, I think you had a hand?
That's right.
Okay. Angela? And then Keith?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I know that we look at these people when they do these crazy things, and we sit here as strangers in the distant future, trying to decide what they did. Was that wrong or was that wrong? That's not good. And it baffles us that these things are recorded here. I don't think those things, that all those events in their lives are recorded so that we can get an example of what's right or wrong or good or bad. I think that these events and these men's lives are supposed to illustrate spiritual principles. And so if we can just get past, just like we did when Abraham took his wife and said it was a sister, that was the distraction. Okay? Go deeper than that and look at it from the other angle and try to understand what is the spiritual principle represented by this. And remember when we talked about Jacob and Esau being your physical and your spiritual that's within you struggling, and that the physical needs to serve the spiritual? It's the physical that despises the birthright. So think about that on a spiritual level.
Okay.
What does that mean? And I think that might be aren't you talking about that in Romans or Hebrews?
Yeah.
Something about
They've said a root of bitterness springing up. So I think that
well, they talk about it as Christ and what he did, and almost like despising that because you've.
yeah.
Okay, I'm lost. Never mind.
No, I feel you. Well, I know. I appreciate you bringing us onto the. I appreciate you bringing us back onto the track of looking at this dichotomy of spiritual versus physical. And Keith,
I'm sorry.
go ahead, Keith.
I'm going to follow up on what Angela's saying, because most of us, I know myself, I didn't find my spiritual self until I was much older. So that means my fleshly self is much older and rooted than my spiritual self.
Sure.
So I'm trying to get the older to serve the younger. My spiritual self is very young still, and I'm still learning my way. And that is a struggle. Okay? So for the older to serve the younger, I'm still bad. I'm still trying to get the older under control. All right? So,
That's a good
unless you're
point.
born spiritual, your physical is going to be older than your spiritual self.
That's a good insight.
I think if we keep that in mind, it sort of puts things in perspective.
Sure, absolutely. I think, one thing that kind of popped out to me in this section is that if Isaac was willfully going astray in rebellion, that he knew the promise that had been spoken to his wife. He knew that his one son had sold the birthright to the other. He knew the character of these two children. but he wanted what he wanted. He had a taste for his game. He had a taste for his son. He was not willing to set it. He was not willing to go with the spiritual principle, but he said, "I love my son, and I'm going to do what I feel is right."
It's like Paul. I know what's right, yet.
I don't do what's right. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. That's
And
absolutely
that
correct.
too. We know what's right, but that's not what we want.
That's correct. Mike?
I want to just make two comments on that. First off, I think it illustrates that God's will is what's superseding here, what is going to happen, regardless of personal decision. His will is what's going to happen, and you can either go with it or against it. In the case of Isaac, I think you could try to speculate on either side of the equation, but I think Isaac, it says that he was ill, and in a week, I mean, he was nearing his end, and he knew that, and he was blind at this point. And you got to go back to the mental capacity and say, did he have that?
You know what just occurred to me, Mike, as you were saying that?
Yeah.
You were saying he was weak and he was old and he was at his end, but you know what? He wasn't.
Was it?
No, he lived for another 27 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, remember Jacob went away to Uncle Laban's house for 20 years, and then he didn't come back until a couple years after that. He hung out in Shechem. Now, you know what? What does that remind you of? I'm sick and I'm dying. That sounds like Esau saying, I'm famished, I'm dying, I'm starving, pour that stuff into me. He's got his appetite, okay? But it just occurred to me as you were saying that, I'm weak and I'm old. He is kind of saying that. But you know what? He was not. He lived until he was 180 years old, 170-something years old.
Abraham was 175 and Isaac was 180.
He lived till he was 180. So he's...
You can physically exist, but...
Yeah, but he was saying, I'm sick and I'm old, and the point that I don't know when the time of my death is.
Yeah,
Sounds a little dramatic if you're going to live for another 50 years.
It does, but you don't hear much else about him.
No, I know. And it sounds terrible, like I'm kicking him under the bus, but and I apologize, Mike.
I was just looking at the ratio. That's only, 10% left on his life.
Here's our math guy, dude.
You live longer then. That's the reality.
That's true.
That's
true. Okay, so you had a second point you wanted to point out. What was that? I apologize.
Just that I think that he was getting to a point where when he truly was wondering, he knew his sons, and he knew that his sons could, or one of his sons could try to, Esau, or Jacob could try to deceive him. And he was at a state where he could be deceived, and I think he may have known that. And he was asking and having faith that no matter what, and that this is the other side of it, God's will is in the equation. And if this is truly his son, that he thinks he's blessing it, he's going to bless him. If it's not, he's still going to receive that blessing, and God's will is going to be done.
Okay, good insight. Absolutely. Was somebody over here popping up a hand? No? Okay. So I think, if you do look at it like perhaps Isaac was being a little fleshly, maybe he's being ruled by his flesh. Maybe he's not. Maybe he has some spiritual guidance that he's relying upon to see this is going to go the way it's going to go, and I think I'm doing the right thing. If you had to look at it and say, okay, we have two parents who are both of them potentially doing the wrong thing. One is, following after their flesh and is going to do what he wants to do regardless. And the other is seeming to be deliberately deceitful. However, feels like she's doing a spiritual good deed. Which is more dangerous? I think that Rebecca's behavior is considerably more dangerous. One is just pure fleshly. One thinks she's operating in the spirit somehow, and yet she's going about getting what she thinks should be done. It's almost like she's feeling backed up by, I know the truth, and I'm going to make it happen. That's a dangerous position to be in, when you know what the truth is, and you're going to do what needs to be done to make it happen. By golly, come hell or high water, it's going to happen. That reminds me of, for example, in Deuteronomy 16, where it talks about justice you shall pursue. That you must pursue justice in a just way. You guys heard that before? Yeah, if you look at Deuteronomy, I have this in my notes here, Deuteronomy 16:18 through 20. It's a principle that I heard related a while ago, and I've always found this absolutely fascinating. If you want to look at that, that's a good idea to take a look at it. Deuteronomy 16:18 through 20. It says, "You shall appoint judges and superintendents for yourselves in all of your gates which Yahweh your Elohim is giving to you for your tribes, and they will judge the people with just judgment. You shall not turn aside the judgment. You shall neither recognize faces in partiality nor take a bribe, for the bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and subverts the words of the righteous. Justice and justice only shall you pursue, so that you may live and tenant the land that Yahweh your Elohim is giving to you." Now this is the concordant literal version, but in the Hebrew it literally just says the word justice twice. Justice, justice you shall pursue. And of course they are suggesting in this translation, and it might be the same in yours, justice and justice only, but I don't think that that's the proper interpretation. And I heard a rabbi talking about this, and it was a very convincing argument to say it's not saying justice and justice only. It's saying justice in a just way you must pursue. Because you can pursue justice, vigilante justice, overkill justice, where you get somebody their head chopped off for stealing, the hand chopped off in a Muslim culture for stealing, chop off your hand. Is that what the Torah says is justice? No. Well, justice has been served, but not in a just way. And so when we look at her saying, I know what the Word of God is. The Word of God was revealed to me that the younger the older would serve the younger. And she's pursuing that, but she's not pursuing it in righteousness. And look at the trouble that she's going to cause by pursuing righteousness in an unrighteous way. Now, I know that sounds a little weird, but can you think of any examples of pursuing righteousness in an unrighteous way? How could you pursue righteousness in an unrighteous way?
Telling Jesus he can't perform miracles on the Sabbath.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good example.
Seeking the knowledge of good and evil by yourself.
Yes, absolutely. Seeking the knowledge of the truth so that you can beat others up with your sword of the Spirit. You can slay your brothers with the sword of the Spirit. I know that each of us has done that at some point. If you're in the Hebrew Roots movement at all, you have probably been guilty of trying to kill your brothers and sisters with the sword of the Spirit. The sword of the Word. I'll kill you all with it. Anyway, sorry. That has been troubling me for some time. I'm like, nobody else is hearing the toilet running? Bunch of lazy people. I'm just kidding.
My good point is that when I said this is before the Torah has been given in its full.
Yeah.
The court Mike says, is that sort of a question mark? And I think I understand what he means.
That the Torah was given prior to this?
Yeah,
or that the basic principles?
We still go towards the whole Moses story, but this might all be setting up almost towards, hey, this was bad.
Mm-hmm, sure.
But now what you just read indeed fully makes sense. If they would have known that, then they would probably not have done that.
Yeah, and I think that you can look at Romans chapters 1, 2, and 3 to talk about the law of nature. The human consciousness will tell you this is not a good idea. The Torah is written on the heart of every human being. I totally believe that. You really have to violate your own conscience and burn it, sear it, and crush it and get it out of the way if you want to do evil. You have to do that because it's built right into you. You don't think so, Gracie?
I think it used to be, but I think as the world gets older, something is changing that because you got people that really have no conscience.
I agree that the consciousness of the nation and then the lawlessness is increasing, and I totally agree with that. But I think that the system that we're living in is definitely designed to crush that out of even children. But I think that, you're right. I couldn't gainsay that, frankly. Angela and then some... Angela?
Remember when Isaac, the promised son, went to get his bride,
Mm-hmm.
Rebecca? She was given the nose ring and the bracelets, and we saw her as a picture of us, right? Because she's the one who has the people growing inside of her.
Sure,
So
sure.
think about Rebecca as the bride, okay? The bride of Christ, the church. And then you have this idea of her pursuing righteous in an unrighteous way. And then you just take a glance back at church history, the Inquisition, the Crusades, the stuff that the bride has done. A lot of pursuing righteous in an unrighteous way. So when I said, these people are doing bad things, but maybe it's a picture of
It's a spiritual
of
picture.
A principle,
Sure.
or a pattern, or something that
That we need to
and
be
that's
aware
why
of.
That's recorded about her, not because you want to make her look bad
No.
for all eternity and have us all know her faults, but that fault was key for us to understand the pattern of something. And what I've been trying to do is look at this as, ever since, we talk about Abraham, the father, Isaac, the promised son, and Jacob, the spirit, those three aspects, if you will. And so when you see these things that they're doing right or doing wrong, or these patterns or these contrasts between them, does that tell us something about those different aspects of our God? For instance, Isaac, there's not a whole lot about Isaac. There's a lot about Abraham, and there is a lot about Jacob, but very little about Isaac. And how short was the son's life here? Okay, really the key event in Isaac's life is when he was offered up on the mountain, where we see this Messianic picture. And then we have a really hard time seeing Isaac doing anything bad after that, because he's our Messianic figure.
Mm-hmm.
But he's just a human. He was just that was a little pattern, a little picture, an illustration of that aspect of God. But that doesn't mean he's going to be that perfect thing his whole life.
That's a good point. Caden?
So back earlier you said that everyone has a Torah on their hearts, and I think that's true. But you also said that you have to go against your consciousness to be able to do some of those things. I can see that, but I also see that we took from the fruit of knowledge of good and evil. So some people's consciousness has some evil. From the beginning, as a child, you learn from yourself to disobey your parents. That's not taught to you. That comes out of nowhere.
Sure it does, yeah.
So I think that with the law of God that came down from Moses, he had this perfect law in which we can decipher what is good and evil, so we don't mix the holy with the profane.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. Mike?
I agree with what Angie was driving at there, and I think that she talked about the picture of the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. And I think there's also a picture with the women in a comparison of them pushing the Word or having some sort of aspect of the Word of God. Right? Like Sarah, you see Debar, or you see Debar with Rebecca. And I think that the
You're too young.
I was just about to make a joke about him getting old and his brain starting to slip. Nah, it'll come. Yes, it will. As soon as I start talking, you just wave your hand. There you go.
So, we got this bigger picture, right? And we've got this flesh and spirit thing going on. Maybe this is the only way that this could have happened. We know that God hated Esau, right?
Says so, yeah.
If Rebecca and Jacob didn't go this path, what's the only other way of getting Esau out of the picture if he had a blessing in it?
Killing him.
Kill him.
That's right, yeah.
So perhaps this was the better route.
Interesting observation. We're going back to the foreknowledge and the predestination of God.
And if Esau is the flesh, thank God he doesn't just kill the flesh, or we wouldn't even be going through this experience.
Yeah.
He'd just
Good
say,
point.
okay, let's just have you be spirit, because your flesh is a problem.
Just kill us all, yeah. Let's just have you be spirit because your flesh is a problem. Yeah, that would mean we would just all have to die. And that's a good, it's a good bumper sticker. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I like that. That's a good option. So let us try to learn from this. I think that's a good lesson. If we can learn nothing else from this, that lesson is, let us pursue righteousness in a righteous way, and remember that our flesh is needing to be held back and restrained, but not killed. At least not yet. I want to just bring to your attention a little bit of a strange thing that I saw here in regards to what he actually said to his son Esau. I'm old and I don't know when I'm going to die. Bring me your hunting gear, make it tasty, and I will bless you. My soul will bless you. It literally says in the text, my soul will bless you before I die. Now, relate what the mother said to the other son. I heard your father say, bring me some food and make it tasty, and I'll eat it. Then I will give you a blessing in the presence of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh before my death. She added that little phrase, in the presence of Adonai. That's not what Jacob said. Or that's not what Isaac said. Why did she add that? Is this a case of the hearing it through the grapevine? She's just misreporting? I mean, you could take this away as, I suppose, a little object lesson in gossip, that what comes in one ear never comes out the other the same way, but I think there might be a little bit more to it than that. Angela?
It's so nefesh or neshama.
Nefesh.
And that's what Jacob said.
That's what Jacob said.
My nefesh will bless you.
My nefesh will bless you before I die. Not my neshama.
Maybe that's what she said.
And she said, he told your brother he's going to give him a blessing in the presence of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Why did she add that? Is she trying to sweeten the pot? Is she trying to incentivize him? Dude, he's going to give your brother the blessing from God.
Because he was about to bless from the flesh, and she said, no, this is going to happen according to what God's told me. That's why she's changing it. I think.
That's okay. I'll accept.
Did she also hear that as a premonition of what she heard from God?
She's putting, that is certainly possible, but when she's reporting to her son what she heard, she's adding something that he did not say. She's misreporting what was spoken. Whether she did that on accident, I don't think it's on accident. I think those words were added for a reason.
Well, what is the blessing?
Well, the blessing is varied. What are you picking? What are you putting down?
So, isn't the blessing really the same blessing expounded upon from Abraham that God gave to Abraham?
Yes, I would say so. Although it does seem to add some temporal blessings are added, whereas I think that the things that were spoken to Abraham and Isaac were purely spiritual. This adds temporal blessings, the dew of heaven and the fullness of the earth, So I think that the temporal blessings were added, but yeah. So what is your point?
So when I think probably what's implied when Jacob's saying blessing is that the blessing's coming down the line from Yahweh to Abraham.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I'm not exactly sure why that she stuck that in there, but I just wanted to bring it to your attention. You might put a little asterisk next to that in your text or something and say, what's going on here? Something for a little further research later on or something. Now, I wanted to also bring to your attention, like Keith mentioned earlier, that she says, go and get me 2 goats. What does she need 2 goats for? Is he going to eat 2 goats? I mean, do you realize that, it takes a whole bunch of us here to eat 1 leg of a goat?
Is it scapegoat? Maybe what they used to do in the traditions?
That is
one in the wilderness and one...
That is the only other time in the Bible where 2 goats are mentioned.
And he shortly after gets asked to
Yeah.
Do you think that there might be something there, that there are 2 goats in Leviticus and one is sent away into the wilderness and one is sacrificed and one is taking away the sins of the people, and Jacob is just about to have to abscond into the wilderness himself here immediately after this story? I think there's something there for sure. I know we don't have a ton of time to review this, but I would say you make a little star, but make a little note to yourself there, the 2 goats. and reread Leviticus chapter 16.
That would seem pretty odd to make Jacob the scapegoat, considering what's going to happen next.
It would.
Ladder and all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would we compare him to holding the sins of the people?
I don't know. I don't know what the actual implication is. I just know that there's something there. And I'm sure that if we were to, talk about it a little bit more and maybe read that section in Leviticus 16, we probably could see some stuff. And I know that if you just go into like Google or something and you type the two goats, which I did, you're going to find a whole boatload of people talking about not only the two goats from Leviticus, but they're comparing and contrasting these two goats here, because this is the only two times in the Bible that two goats are specifically mentioned. So there's something there. I don't know exactly what it is. I'm just drawing it to your attention so that you can perhaps take a look at it. Keith?
Well, I don't know where the second goat goes, but there's the two goats, and one of the goats goes to Yahovah, the other one goes to Esav.
Yes.
Okay, it's the Esav. So,
But whatever that is.
but we know whatever the meal's prepared, one of them does go into the Father, right? He goes in, gives the Father, and gets the blessing. So that's the only part of the picture I see.
Okay.
The other
Interesting.
goat, it went off somewhere. I don't care where that went, but there was a goat involved, and it belonged to Yahweh. He went into the Father and got his blessing. The little deception and all that stuff, but
Yeah, you could say you're looking at the spiritual side of it. Well, and look at it. Angela appreciates that, I'm sure. But I think if you look at it as, think about this too, that when he is about to escape, what happens to him as soon as he leaves? We'll read about that next week when he goes to Bethel and he sees that ladder descending from heaven, connecting heaven and earth, and he has a great spiritual experience immediately after separating himself from his family, which is interesting because we've seen this pattern before of separating and then God is revealed. And separating, it happened twice with Abraham, or 3 times perhaps, huh? Yeah, absolutely. And we saw it also with Isaac, when he split away from Abimelech, and he said, hey, move away from us because you're too powerful for us. That God appeared to him immediately after that. And that happens to Jacob. He absconds into the wilderness, and bam, there's God showing him the ladder that's, and that's a huge, powerful passage. What does it mean? I'm not exactly sure. But again, make a note of it and maybe do some comparison and contrast. You see some interesting things. Also looking at, Jacob seems to be concerned with bringing a curse upon himself, but Rivka says, your curse be upon me. I got a question for you. What is a curse? I'm not talking about, witchcraft and I put a spell on you, potion number 9 kind of stuff. What in the Bible is a curse?
Something that will happen that has been like in a premonition, or something that will happen whatever you do.
That is correct. It is a promise from God that if you do not do what I tell you to do, this bad thing will happen to you. It is the punishment for sin. That's basically what it is. So what is his mother saying to him? I will take your punishment for sin upon myself. Is that even possible? Now you've done it, Jerry. Yeah, somebody taking the punishment, the curse, for someone, and Paul even talks about this, that someone taking the curse upon themselves, this is the first time that it's ever mentioned in the Bible, someone taking a curse upon themselves for someone else. Angela?
Well, we know someone who did that.
We definitely do. We definitely do.
Possible.
Did it actually turn out the way she promised? Did she take the curse upon herself?
Do we hear anything about her after
We never hear from her again.
She never gets to see him again.
She never gets to see him again, and we never hear from her again. These words that she speaks are her last in this chapter. She's gone after this.
What about the yoke that was mentioned? I don't remember exactly where it said.
When he breaks off the yoke. Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a second. Good insight. Keith?
I think in the movie I saw he had to see her one more time.
That's right. You can always count on Keith to bring up the movie. That's right. No, I think that's just something that's interesting. I mean, did it actually turn out the way she promised? I'll take your curse upon me. Not exactly. Jacob did have to deal with his own deception. The same exact thing happened to him when Uncle Laban switched out his bride on him. He got tricked in exactly the same way that he tricked his father. So Rivka, I think it might be a premonition, a little bit of foreshadowing. It didn't work out for her. She was not able to fulfill her promise of your curse be upon me, my son. Just listen to me and go do what I say. Didn't work out that way, but it might be a little bit of a premonition about someone taking on the curse for someone else.
But maybe it was okay for 14 years, right? Maybe Esau would have been over it in 7.
Possibly. That's not a bad thought. Carla?
Well, maybe the curse on her, though, was having to stay there and live with
The Hittite women and her son? Yeah. That is certainly possible. Anyone else have anything that they were... Did I see another hand going? Okay. Just a quick question. Why did Rebekah have Esau's clothing in her house with her?
Because all mothers wash their sons' clothes.
Interesting observation, Keith, and that is undoubtedly true. But I think it's something to consider that sons did not move away from the family. Generally, they're going to stay at home, and I think that's why Rivka is complaining at the end of this chapter to her husband, saying, I really think we ought to send Jacob away. I think she knows exactly what's going to happen because she heard her one son say, I'm going to kill that dude as soon as my dad dies. But she tells her husband, we really ought to send Jacob away to find a bride.
She threatened to kill herself if he doesn't send her away. That's the way that's what I thought. That was her manipulating him to send Jacob out of here so that he doesn't get killed.
I agree. But she told her husband, we really ought to send Jacob to get a wife from among my relatives because...
Said, my life basically isn't worth living if he marries one of these women.
Yeah. Well, if you read in the book of Jasher, it actually goes into a bunch of detail about these wives of Esau. It's kind of interesting. And it also talks about, Shem coming for a visit and getting totally mistreated and showing no respect, no hospitality at all from the wives of Esau. They're like the only ones home, and Shem's knocking on the door and they're like, "Who are you? Get out of here!" It's pretty funny, but just something to throw out there. Now, I want to bring to your attention one thing that I said last week, and I'm going to need to back myself up on this and say mea culpa. I had spoken about this section here where it says there was some contention regarding different translations in here where it says when he actually seems to give Esau a blessing of his own, and he's like, your home will be of the richness, but some of our translations said away from the richness of the earth. I didn't realize this, and I had only done a little bit of research, enough to stick my own foot in my mouth, that you could technically translate that Hebrew word it's not actually a word, it's actually one of those little sticky phrases on the front of a word, which can mean of or away from, and that it was apparently it's been a big argument for a long time. How should you actually translate this? And I just thought I would ask you. I know that we briefly discussed this last time, but I thought it was worth exploring just a little bit more. And that is, what evidence do we have that his home will be of the richness of the earth or away from the richness of the earth, away from the dew of the heavens? Because frankly, yes, you can translate this either way. That is, either translation is totally legitimate, but I think you have to go with context clues, and you also have to kind of ask yourself, why has everyone been translating it in a lot of Bibles as of the richness of the earth? Keith?
Well,
he's an outdoorsman, first of all, so he's going to be within the richness of the earth. That's what he does. He's always running around hunting. He's in the wilderness and stuff. That's
Okay.
what you're talking about. So, but at the same time, he's begging for a blessing, and I think Isaac has to feel bad because he gave away the blessing. I don't think he's going to give him one that's a bad blessing.
Well, see, that's the key question here is, did he actually give him what apparently is a curse, or did he go ahead and say, okay, I got a little something I'll give you?
I mean, if you read this blessing, it's very, okay, so you're going to have the fatness of the earth, or you're going to have the fertile fields of the earth, and the
Okay,
dew
well,
from the sky above. I mean, that's an okay blessing. You'll live outdoors and in your tent, you'll go out and you'll hunt. I mean,
okay, that's one way to look at it. I think that if you look at the contextual clues about what's going on here, when I've made him your Lord, and I've given all of his kinsmen his servants, and I gave him grain and wine to sustain him. What else is there that I can do for you? He's saying, in essence, there is nothing else I can do for you. But then he says this, and it seems like, okay, maybe I can give you a little something. But then you look at this contrasting thing here when it says, you will live by your sword. That's some of the things that I was looking at today that was scholars brought up, and it says, okay, wait, either you're being blessed by, if you're being blessed by the richness of the earth and the dew of heaven, you're being blessed by God, because God brings forth the richness of the earth and the dew of heaven, rain and abundance of crops. And you also have to look at comparing and contrasting that with living by your sword. You can't have it both ways. You're either going to live by your sword, or you're going to live from we never have examples in the text of the Bible anywhere of Esau living by the dew and the rain and the richness of the earth. It doesn't happen historically. But it does happen historically that he is a vagabond and a rape and a pillage kind of guy who is constantly fighting and traveling around as like a mercenary. He's living by his sword. Look at the example of his grandson, the Amalekites, who attacked the Israelites as they were leaving Egypt, and they attacked the women and the children in the baggage train at the end of the caravan. These are robbers and vagabonds. You also look at the territory which Esau lives in, as described in the Bible, which is basically southeastern Jordan or northwestern Saudi Arabia. There's no oil there. There's no richness of the ground. There's no dew of the heavens. It is basically a barren wasteland. And his descendants are living as wandering vagabonds who are they're like highwaymen. They're highwaymen. They're robbers. They're train robbers. They're going around. They're like those people in the wilderness who are, happing upon wary travelers and killing them and taking their stuff. That's the way he lives. So it seems to me, after having researched this out a little bit more, that it probably is a better translation in your text if it says, your home will be away from the richness of the earth and away from the dew of heaven. That is a legitimate translation. But just a note to yourself there, looking in your text, a lot of Bibles are translating it, your home will be of the richness of the earth. And some have suggested, well, it's because, they felt bad for Esau. And I understand that. But the evidence of the text and the evidence from history and the historical context does not, to me, suggest that Esau ever lived of the richness of the earth and the dew of the heaven. Keith?
So you're saying this curse, then, because it's not a blessing, then carried on to the rest of his lineage, and that's how they lived.
Yeah. And I think you see a pattern of that a lot of times when the blessing is given to the children, that the blessings that are given, you can look at Jacob blessing his own 12 sons at the end of his life as a very similar example, that the firstborn does not get the blessing. Same thing happens. He didn't give that blessing to Reuben. Remember why? Because Reuben slept with one of his wives. Passes over, bless you, Simeon and Levi. Why? Because they slaughtered the villagers of Shechem. And the blessing goes to who? Judah. But also Joseph It's like a split blessing. So he follows the same pattern. But I think that the interesting thing there is that it doesn't, the blessing or the curse, or, you know, maybe it's not necessarily a curse, maybe it's a prophecy. It's not like saying, oh, this is what you deserve or something. It's saying, this is what's going to happen. So it doesn't necessarily always happen to the person who's being spoken over, but their descendants. And I think that that's a pattern you can see in the Bible a lot. So that is just one thing that I wanted to bring to your attention. And the history of the Amalekites and Esau's descendants, you know that Herod was a descendant of Esau. That Herod was an Idumean, and Idumean is simply the Greek way of saying Edom. Edomian, it's Idumean. Herod the Great, who tried to kill all the children in the time of Yeshua, was a descendant of Esau. It's probably partially why he was hated so much by his Jewish people who he was ruling. Angela?
Are you going to address the you shall break the yoke from your neck?
I was anticipating that was kind of my lead-in, is that I think that that actually might be, it was actually, well, let me just ask you guys, what do you think about it? Because I need to wrap up. We're getting a little bit long in the tooth here. Angela, you want to just go ahead and...
In 2 Kings 8:20.
2 Kings 8:20. Read it for us.
The reign of Joram in Judah, it says, in his days Edom revolted from the hand of Judah and made a king over themselves.
So that was Joram? That's in Kings?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Edom revolted, and then in 22 it says, so Edom revolted against Judah to this day.
Okay, so that means that shortly after the death of David and Solomon, not shortly, but a little while after that, that Edom broke off the yoke of serving his younger brother and has basically never gone back again, as far as I can tell. I think that there's the research that I did, and this is hard for people to kind of find out definitively, trying to trace the descendants of Esau. There's a lot of speculation that it's basically some people from the area of the Jordan, not the Jordan River, but southeastern Jordan, the country, the kingdom of Jordan. There is some evidence that some ancestors of the Syrians, the Kurds, and even Turkish people were descendants of Esau. And to me, I think that if you look at, I mean, when you think about the Palestinians today who are fighting against Israel and throwing rocks and burning tires and, you know, trying to cause a ruckus over there and wanting their land back and such, who do you think those people are? Are those descendants of Ishmael? Are they descendants of Esau? Are they, who are these people? Where'd they come from? Yeah, what's your idea about that? Who are these people who are demanding to have the land of Israel and the Jews don't belong here and we're taking it all and we'll fight to the death? Who are these people? Any ideas?
Did Esau marry Ishmael's? So the same.
Yeah, it's essentially the same thing. Ishmael did intermarry with his uncle Ishmael's children. Esau did. So yes, and I think there's ample evidence to suggest historically that the people who are in the land of Israel now fighting for control of it away from the Jews are the descendants of Ishmael and Esau.
In that prophecy, in his blessing, if you use that as like a clue, it would be people who live where there's dry desert who are violent and they're trying to throw off the yoke of Judah, and so then you would maybe go from that direction.
Especially if you look at the yoke from a spiritual perspective, like Yeshua saying, my yoke is easy, or the yoke of the Pharisees and stuff like that. Yeah, absolutely. So that's all the time that we have this evening, but you know, we may touch on this just a little bit next time, because I have just a couple more things, but maybe not. That's it. Thank you guys. It was a good discussion tonight. Let's pray.